Hi, hello, welcome to my review of Barbenheimer. I've been really looking forward to this, not just because Barbenheimer is a meme at this point. In general, I was just very hyped for both of these movies, and to watch them on the same day is just kind of a fun thing to do. And also, it's just, Christopher Nolan, every single new movie that he comes out with, I will definitely watch. Obviously, he's one of the most acclaimed directors, and he has made some of my favorite movies, definitely. But also, Greta Gerwig is a very acclaimed director, even though I did not like Little Women as much as most people do. So I was really hyped for Barbenheimer, definitely. At the end of the video, I will definitely talk about how it was watching both of these movies on the same day, but I will be reviewing both of these movies separately for now. Starting with Barbie, because that's the movie I watched first. And right off the bat, I can say Barbie is one of my favorite movies of the year, which I did not expect. I mean, I know it was written by Noah Baumbach, who directed Marriage Story and The Meyerowitz Stories and a few more other movies that are very well acclaimed. And Greta Gerwig directed Lady Bird and Little Women. Lady Bird I really love, and Little Women being a movie that I don't love, but that's at least very beloved by a lot of people. Even though I knew those people are making this film and that it's already getting a lot of hype, I still was not really sure if I was going to go out of this movie liking the movie about Barbie, because I mean, it's Barbie. What can you expect? But I'm definitely surprised positively. It exceeded my expectations by miles. One reason of that is because I actually managed to avoid any spoilers of this movie. Like, I really knew nothing except for one little clip about Ryan Gosling singing. Other than that, I knew nothing about this movie, which I am very grateful for, because I did not know what this movie was really about, and I also got surprised at every single turn that this movie makes, because it's just so different from anything I've seen. Good things about this movie. First of all, this movie looks amazing. This movie is one of the best looking movies I've seen, not just this year, but ever. This movie has some of the best production design I've ever seen. And not just, I mean, it looks good, it has some good, nice colors, but it actually, like, it's real sets, which is one thing that's already amazing to me. But it also just looks so authentic. But not authentic as in realistic, but authentic in the way that it looks like toys. This really looks like a toy world, and they managed to make it so believable, but also just so creative. And again, there's real sets in this movie. There's a lot of special effects that look stupid, but in the way that it is supposed to look like toys, which just look very good. All the costumes are amazing, all the makeup. It's one of the best movies just looking at it. And it's truly Oscar worthy, which I did not expect to say about a Barbie movie, but this movie is already on that aspect Oscar worthy, definitely. Another great thing is the soundtrack, not on its own, because honestly, we listened to the soundtrack after finishing the movie. On the drive home, we listened to the whole soundtrack, and I mean, it's kind of boring, to be honest, but in the movie, it did not distract me or anything. Like, it fit perfectly to the movie. On its own, it's not as great, but it fit to the movie very well. And especially like the first scene where they basically introduced the Barbie world, it was just hilarious. Also, all the songs by Ken, it was just very well done and very funny. Also, the performances by basically everyone were just so great. They are so funny in this film. Margot Robbie manages to play a Barbie and make her so human. Like, Barbie is not human at all, and she manages to have both these very inhuman aspects about her that were very funny, but also very human aspects, because she has a whole arc in this film that I was also very emotionally invested, actually, which I did not expect. Again, I expected this movie to be a bit fun, maybe, but not as good as this actually was, because it was constantly surprising, it was constantly just funny, and constantly actually emotionally investing. And a lot of praise for that goes to Margot Robbie for delivering such a good performance as Barbie. And the thing is, I don't know why, but I didn't expect her to be as good. But I kind of forgot in how many movies Margot Robbie was that I just enjoyed, and that I also just thought were very impressive from her performance. I mean, looking at her filmography, she was in Babylon, which I have not seen, but for example, Harley Quinn in Birds of Prey and The Suicide Squad, that was an amazing unhinged performance. In Bombshell, she was easily the best part of the movie, easily the emotional core of the film, for me at least. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, she was very charming. In Focus as well, in About Time, in The Wolf of Wall Street, she was also a very emotional point of that movie that was just great. And basically, every performance that I've seen by her is just great. And in this one, that's the same. But moving on to Ken, played by Ryan Gosling, he's easily my favorite thing about this whole film. Basically everything he did just made me laugh. And if I did not laugh, I was just smiling for the whole time. He was so amazing. And Ryan Gosling, it's the same. I kind of forgot how many movies he was in and how great he was in all of them. I mean, La La Land, Blade Runner, The Big Short, First Man, The Gray Man, fucking Place Beyond the Pines. He's so good at basically everything he's in. And so, yeah, this absolutely perfect performance by him, a perfect comedic performance in this movie, was something I did not expect, but it will stay in my mind forever. And also everyone else. I mean, the president was very funny, played by Issa Rae. Michael Cera was great. There were also a lot of celebrity cameos that just really worked. Basically, the whole cast just did their job perfectly in this film and really managed to make this film as perfect as it could be, because they understand their assignment. It's just a ridiculous film, and they really made their roles as ridiculous as possible. But again, what I really liked about Ryan Gosling as Ken is also the fact that he managed to have these very emotional moments as well. But Margot Robbie has these emotional moments, but actually managed to make me emotionally invested. To be honest, everything that Ryan Gosling does with his emotional moments made me laugh even more. Like, he just managed to be very sad but still be very funny in those moments. I don't know how he does it, but he just did. It was amazing. I already said that multiple times now, but the humor is just perfect. I mean, there's a lot of things that sometimes don't hit, but to be honest, my favorite comedies are that they have so many jokes of such a wide range that it just, like, not every single joke lands for me, but because it's just so creative and so out there with its humor, I just appreciate it even when I don't have to laugh at every single joke that is there. A lot of adult jokes were also in this movie. This movie is definitely not made for kids. But one last thing I really enjoy about this movie is the fact that it manages to take the Barbie property and actually, like, make a compelling, an interesting and unpredictable and new story about it. Comparing this to, for example, Super Mario Bros. Super Mario Bros. Stinks even more against a movie like Barbie. I really did not like the Super Mario Bros. Movie this year, but I kind of enjoyed it. But to be honest, it was just so forgettable and so by the numbers that it was just, again, it was just forgettable. But a movie like this, and it manages to risk something, it's just a lot more memorable because of that. This movie could have been very boring, but it was not. It tried something new. It tried to be risky, and therefore it just worked very well. Some bad things about this movie, yes, there are some. First of all, everything that was taking place in the real world was just a little bit less interesting, but I cannot blame the movie for that, because I mean, the story was playing on that a lot, because the movie is about Barbie getting into the real world and seeing how shitty it actually is, and how not perfect it is, and against her imaginations, which I mean, it worked, but especially all the stuff that was going on with the CEOs of Mattel, it just wasn't as funny. I also thought the CEOs themselves, like, they were very comically stupid, but it didn't really fit for them, for these characters. It was just kind of too much. Mostly everything that happened with them was just kind of boring, and I didn't like it. And I was just waiting for it to get back to Ken or Margot Robbie or the Barbie world itself. So that was kind of bad. And also there was one thing that I feel like people would like a little bit less and be a bit more annoyed by, which was basically all the feminist messages about this film. Not the messages itself, because the message is obviously good, but it was just kind of the way that they were presented at some point, because there are some scenes that are just straight up telling people, okay, feminist messages. They felt a bit forced and not very well written. It just was kind of a little bit too much. I don't have anything against the messages being there, but they could have been written into the movie a little bit more subtle than it was in this film. To be honest, because the movie was so ridiculous and because all the stories and everything about the movie was so well put together, I just didn't get annoyed by that as much as I would be in maybe some other movies that have scenes like this where they explain what their message is. But I could understand why people would be annoyed by that, because it was genuinely just not as well put together as it could have been. But that's about it. That's actually everything I disliked about this film. It was hilarious. It was very entertaining. I had so much fun with it. It felt very short, but also in a good way. Like, it was just very well paced. I never really got bored with this film at all. And because there were so many jokes, I feel like it would be a great rewatch, definitely. Picking up on a lot of things that I didn't notice. And if I was a Barbie fan, I mean, I would just love this film so much. There would be so many Easter eggs that I could notice. Probably if I had a Barbie doll, I could recognize my Barbie dolls somewhere in the movie, because they had so many different types of Barbies in this film that it's just a lot of attention to detail, which I appreciated a lot about this film. So yeah, definitely I don't know if this is my favorite Greta Gerwig film. I don't know if it's above Lady Bird, but it's definitely about equal. This movie is great. I really enjoyed it. One of my favorite movies of the year. It's an 8.5 out of 10. Yeah, I'm happy about this. About 20 minutes after watching Barbie, I watched Oppenheimer, the new Christopher Nolan film. And Oppenheimer is definitely also a good movie, but to be honest, this is to me a middle tier Christopher Nolan film, which is still very good because he's made a lot of good movies, but still, I am not as happy about this film as I am with a lot of his other movies, because it's just very inconsistent. One thing that I have to appreciate about this film is that it's his first biopic. It's his most character-driven film, definitely. Most of his movies are very interested in exploring concepts. For example, Inception is about, dreams and dreams and dreams. It's a very confusing concept to explore, but it's very well done. Interstellar has the concept of what if there are wormholes and time travel and, interesting things, definitely. And yeah, he kind of goes into a lot of different topics in his films, which I really appreciate, but this is definitely the most character-driven movie out of all of his films, it feels like, except for maybe Memento. But yeah, Oppenheimer has a lot of high highs, but also low lows in his 3-hour runtime. It starts out like a typical biopic, but even worse, to be honest, which I really did not appreciate, because it's trying to tell a lot of the story of Oppenheimer in his life and how he kind of became as successful as he was, to the point where he is the person who is assigned to be part of the development of the atomic bomb. Yeah, basically that part of the movie is my least favorite part. It's just, I think it's actually bad. I think this is a really bad part of the film. Some things I don't like about it is, firstly, it feels like a very generic biopic in a way that it's just trying to tell a story. And it was also like very difficult to get into in a way. I mean, I knew kind of that this movie was going to be a bit difficult to understand, but it just jumps in instantly without, any setup or anything. But that's basically also how the whole 30 or maybe 45 minutes of this movie is. If you've seen the trailer of this movie, that's basically the way this whole section of the movie feels. It just never pauses, which I think can be a good thing, but in this case it was not. It was just way too much. Basically, in every conversation, if there was a space, maybe 1 second, that was not filled with someone talking, it was just cut out. And you can really see how conversations are very badly cut together, because people are in different positions than they were before when they are talking, and it just doesn't feel smooth. It just feels like they really had this stretch of the movie much longer before, but they kind of realized that it was too much in the movie, so they had to cut out a lot, and that's what it feels like. And also there was just so much music during that time that really no scene felt like it had any importance or weight or emotional investment, because it just felt like they were rushing through this story to get to the interesting part of the film. Constant music, no real pauses at all, no setup shots for any of the scenes. You just jump into conversations here and there, and you jump back and forth in time, and it doesn't feel smooth at all. It just doesn't feel like anything is really important. You just feel like, okay, I am learning all this information, now we can move on to the most interesting part of the movie, which is the building of the atomic bomb. This middle part of the movie is definitely what I expected to be in the film. Everything around it was kind of okay. I didn't really know what I would get into, but this part I knew was in the movie. The building of the atomic bomb, and basically Oppenheimer's mindset during the time leading up to it and the time after they finished developing it. And that was easily the best thing about the whole movie. Firstly, because it already took so much more time with everything. It was still very fast, there was still a lot of dialogue, but it just felt like everything had a little bit more importance because they just took their time a little bit more, which I enjoyed so much more. There were actually some scenes that had no music, which were so relaxing even. I just felt like a lot of weight was just lifted from me during those scenes. But also, I think this part is very good because it manages to make me tense in the first test of the atomic bomb. Even though, like, we all know what happened. History already wrote itself. We know who Oppenheimer is and what he did. So the test of the atomic bomb shouldn't be interesting at all. But they still made it very tense and so investing. And also, I mean, Cillian Murphy in the whole movie is amazing, but in this stretch of the movie I think he's at its best, because he really shows the conflict in his mind, and if it's the right thing to build the atomic bomb, and what his morals in the situations are. And also, after they finished and the bombs are actually used, I think it's really interesting to look at Oppenheimer in this situation. There are a lot of scenes that are just very stressful, very haunting, that are almost like in a horror movie. And I thought, again, that was the best part of this whole movie, just looking in the mindset of J. Robert Oppenheimer during those times. But then the movie moved into a different direction again. I really don't know how I feel about this. It's basically this legal battle between, I forgot his name, this man played by Robert Downey Jr. and Oppenheimer, because Robert Downey Jr.'s character has something against Oppenheimer that kind of makes him want to destroy the reputation of Oppenheimer, which is kind of an interesting plotline. I was just not invested at all. First of all, because Robert Downey Jr.'s character he had a motivation, but his motivation was just not good enough presented so that I could be invested in him. Like, I really just didn't care about this plotline at all, and it was so stretched out as well that I just, at some point, I just wanted a conclusion to that. I kind of wanted to get back to Robert Oppenheimer's feelings and how he felt about the whole situation, about him basically inventing the thing that it destroyed a lot of people's lives. That was so much more interesting than this whole legal battle between Robert Oppenheimer and Robert Downey Jr. Here and there are still a lot of moments that I thought were genius, especially the ending, which was so... I really, really loved the ending. The last shot of this movie, or maybe the last 5 minutes of this film, were really good. They relied much more, again, on the mind of Robert J. Oppenheimer. So yeah, this movie was definitely very inconsistent to me. Technically, this movie is great, at least for the most part. I mean, the only technical thing about this movie that I did not appreciate as much was the editing, but to be honest, the music is so amazing. It's truly, truly amazing. The cinematography is great, the performances, the visual effects, the sound, but the movie just kind of went from horrible to really, really good, then to kind of boring, and then really, really good again, which I did not like. I actually think that this movie either should have been longer, actually, even though I wasn't invested at all and it felt like 4 hours already. I feel like this movie would have benefited from being maybe 3.5 hours long, to give the first third of the movie a little bit more time, because it just felt so rushed. Or they should have added a lot more runtime to the first third of the movie and removed it from the last third of the movie, because that was much less interesting, because they tried to show you a lot of the mind of Robert Downey Jr.'s character. But because he was not as interesting, it just felt like there was a lot of wasted time during that time period that we could have needed in some other time periods with J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was much more interesting as a character in this film. But because this movie still gets kind of better after having seen the film and looking at this movie in a bigger picture, it definitely gets better in my mind. I already felt a lot better about the movie when driving home. So I don't dislike this movie, but I just think it's very inconsistent. So I would give this movie a 7 out of 10, or maybe a 6.5 out of 10, somewhere between that. It's still very good. It's not my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, but it's good. So was Barbenheimer worth it? I really don't know. The thing is, I watch a lot of movies back to back, not just at home, but also in the cinema. I've watched a lot of movies back to back because I just, I can't afford driving to the next theater too often, and I don't have the time as well. So it's much more practical. But I think this is one of my least favorite double features that I watched together. It was just exhausting, especially in the way that we watched it. We were with a lot of friends, but still, I just felt so tired after Oppenheimer. I watched Barbie first, and we had maybe like 20 minutes in between Barbie and Oppenheimer. We didn't have time to even buy anything for the cinema, so we were just thirsty and hungry for that time. And after Oppenheimer was over, it was very late and I was just exhausted. So I don't know if this was really worth it. The whole point of it was that this was a joke, because both of these movies are so vastly different. So I'm kind of glad I watched it together, but I don't think it was benefiting my enjoyment of any of these two movies. Maybe if you actually watch Barbenheimer, maybe start with Oppenheimer, or have a little bit more time in between those two movies. There's a YouTuber called Thomas Flight. He makes a lot of great videos about movies and analyzing movies. He put this very well because he was kind of criticized for rating Barbie higher than Oppenheimer. But his way of putting this is, one was like eating a very well-made 3-course meal at a fine dining establishment, but there ended up being a hair in my food. And the other was like drinking a $5 milkshake on a hot day that tasted perfect. And that's basically the best way to put this movie. Barbie was amazing, it was a lot of fun, but intellectually not as challenging. And the other movie was intellectually very challenging, but just had a lot of problems that made me objectively rate the movie a little bit worse than the other one. So for what it is, Barbie is definitely a better movie. So in other words, Barbenheimer was everything I wanted. I'm enlightened, and I'm giving Barbenheimer a 10 out of 10.